webinars for Unhotel Global to talk more immersively about some of the destinations that we all want to visit. But we don't want to visit just as a tourist. We want to visit as a traveler. We want to immerse in local experiences. We want to have authentic experiences. And that is the reason we thought of bringing in partners from the world to you so that they can share about what truly locally the country, the destination that we visit, that we want to visit really look like, and what kind of experiences we can have. So I'm welcoming Tuan and Thanh from Vietnam, who are our partners and have been curating some amazing experiences for our guests this season as well. So thank you so much, Tuan and Thanh. Thank you for joining from Vietnam. How do you say hello in Vietnamese? I think, we would love to hear that.
Xin chào.
Xin chào.
Xin chào.
Okay.
Xin chào.
So thank you for joining us, and let's quickly deep dive into some of the questions that we received from our travelers and guests. We also collected. So one of the thing, like many Southeast Asian countries, is that our country is so rich in variety of things. A lot of travelers, when they start their research to the country, there's too much information on Google. What is the best way to start researching if I want to go to Vietnam?
Company is we want to show Vietnam as in a way that you wouldn't be able to see if you went on Google. Vietnam is not just about the war. Vietnam is about many things that people don't talk about. So that's the part that we want to show, especially for Indian customers. One of the things that you don't get to see a lot if you start Googling is Vietnam is the meeting point of two great cultures. From the north, we're influenced by Chinese, and from the south, we were influenced by Indian. Actually, the three Champa kingdoms in the south were established by Indian nobles who were exiled from India many years ago. So there are relics and ruins that Indian people immediately connect and say, hey, this is exactly like, or very similar to what it was. There are things that in the Champa custom that they worship fertility symbols such as the yoni and the lingam, and worship the Hindu gods. So for Indian, for a lot of people who go on Google, you don't actually get this sort of information. You get overwhelmed with the food and the beaches and the war, right? I mean, that's all good stuff, but let's talk about more interesting things. So that's what we want to. Out there. So if we're going to approach food, it's going to be a totally different experience. So we might take you to a poet, a Champa poet, who is a cookbook author, who has a small bamboo house on the riverside, and she will share her recipes with you, and as she's cooking, and occasionally she'll start dancing and singing in her Champa language. It's a dying language that there's only about 400,000 people who speak this language.
Women travelers. Many of my friends from Europe travel here by themselves. They meet me at certain destination, but they've never felt any sort of harassment or any even sort of indiscretion toward them. This is something that's quite amazing right now. It should not be quite amazing, but it is, and this is where Vietnam is very interesting.
when somebody asks me what is the best time to visit a place, I also say avoid when the entire world is there, because if you can, of course, there are people with children in school and you get off only in certain periods. But then there are a lot of travelers who can avoid the peak crowd season. And what is your take on that and suggestion to our audience?
If you would like to avoid the heat, the northern part of Vietnam during the end of the year
Mm-hmm.
and the early months of the year could be cooler. Even in the southern part of Vietnam, the weather would be dry and not too hot. Like at the end of the our dry season in the southern part of Vietnam would be right now. April, May is the peak. Central part of Vietnam, the peak would be in June, July. Those sort of the period. If you are heat sensitive, then this is the period to avoid. The north of Vietnam is similar to the central part of Vietnam too. Aside that, September, October could be really hot.
We're biking, we're running our bicycle through the village, and suddenly there's a woman, we stop by a woman making noodles and have lunch with her, right? It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
cost anything, right? And it's very genuine, it's very authentic. So a lot of what we do doesn't have a cost associated with it, because we can't actually say, well, this experience with this woman costs you $10 per person, because she doesn't charge us $10 per person. So yes, it's a complicated question to answer, because yes, there are really cheap experiences that you can buy out there, and we're not gonna try and compete with that, but you can buy goods direct from them. So the woman that Tuan mentions, the silk weaver, she does supply to shops, but while you're experiencing the whole silk weaving aspect, you can buy direct from her. So we also visit a breed mat weaver in Hoi An, and you can buy placemats for your, people don't sleep on reed mats anymore, but you can buy these small reed mats for as placemats for your table, and that's something that is genuine and it's locally produced. Vietnamese silk and lacquer are two of the things that I personally love. So there are a lot of places where you can see the process, the whole process, how Vietnamese lacquer and how Vietnamese silk is produced, and buy the stuff directly. And they make wonderful gifts of souvenirs, and it benefits local people. I mean, there's a product called lacquer silk. It's only produced in Vietnam, and it's silk, but they put a resin on it over 32 times, and it's washed and rewashed over 32 times. It's this amazing deep black color that is only produced by one family in Vietnam, and there's nowhere else in the world that does this lacquer silk. So these are the things that we would recommend.
Oh, very good question, and a very big question as well. I think this is where I think it would be interesting, and we should focus more on the interests of our travelers. If you are interested in art, for example, this is what happened in my mind. We can show you a few art gallery, art space in Hanoi, in the small house. Tuan know the place really well as well. You can go there. They have a selection of arts, paintings, sculptures, and everything like that, of young generation of Vietnamese artists that you can talk to. Or in Hoi An, you can really sit down, talk with one of the artists that I really like. She paints on silk. This is the tradition in Vietnam, and she works on lacquer as well. Or if you are really interested in Cham culture, then we can have the person like Tuan mentioned to talk to you about the Cham culture, about the music, about their dance, or about their food. And everywhere in town like that, we can have someone talking to you. Eventually, when you go down to Saigon, and through our connection, we can ask someone who is fascinated about Vietnamese architect and interior, and she can walk you through the different period of Vietnamese furnitures. For example, why do we have those sort of? It's very precise, and we can go that to those sort of precision. Or if you go north to Sapa, for example, you can start doing, in fact, the cotton, or if it's the season of the linen, you can participate, in fact, in the preparation of the linen from a Hmong woman in Sapa who is our partner in Sapa. So there's so many different angles of the culture that can be tailored to the interests of our travelers. And I think this is where it could be really interesting, and we can go in depth, aside having the extraordinary sunset and sunrise in Ha Long Bay, for example. This is something that
Go to Ha Long Bay, you're going to be surrounded by at least 10, 20 different boats. There's speedboats, and there's and if you want to go to kayaking in Ha Long Bay, you're going to be one of 100 different kayaks, and you're only allowed to kayak in an area of about 15 square meters. You know? So visualize that. Now, we will skip all that. We will take you to an area where you can kayak as far as you want and as long as you want. You're not going to be surrounded by 20 other boats. You're not going to have karaoke music next to you when you're trying to have a calm and serene experience on this beautiful spot. The reason we're able to do this is that we're willing to pay a bit more for that experience for you, and we absorb it now, our cost. We're willing to take lower profit, unlike other people, because I think the experience is worthwhile, and on top of that, we don't want to promote mass tourism. I mean, as an ethical and responsible company, we don't want to promote mass tourism. So by taking people to a place that is massively touristy, does nothing for that location. It's adding to all the problems that, and overburdened infrastructure. And the tourists themselves, they're not getting a great experience. They're getting a terrible experience, and they're going to go home and they hate it. So we want to avoid all that. And we can still do all the popular things, Hoi An, you can't miss Hoi An. But Hoi An, if you go to Hoi An at between the hours of 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., you can't walk. It's gridlock. It's people. It's Times Square, New York at peak hour. It's horrible. So we change the flow of all these things. If we take you to Mekong Delta, for instance, it's also a place you shouldn't miss. We reverse all of that stuff. We go to at a different hour. We go to a location that people don't go to.
Really simple. Just keep it in a very simple way, and as any smart traveler, we can really easily figure out the price value of whatever we have in hand. And this is something that will ease us a lot when we travel. As Tuan say, mass production is something that right now we have everywhere in the world, and Vietnam is going to that path as well. For example, if you expected really a cheap silk items, those silk items are not exactly silk or whatever it is, and this is really cheap. However, we can source out a fabulous woman who do from A to Z still in her workshop about 40 kilometers away from Hanoi. And if you are really interested in silk, you can go and discover it. And for me, an item that is made by the tradition from A to Z in one place, and exactly it is made there, it would cost you about 25 to 30 US dollars a scarf. One, manually made, handmade, in that village by the local people that sustain their life by doing that and keeping the tradition. Then
Absolutely
I think
wonderful. I want to come right now to buy that. So no, that gives us some insight.
If you really want to do a speedy to discover every highlight of the country, then go back to Vietnam again to discover in depth. Then eventually 10 to 12 days you can cover the whole country. If you are having a really short period of time, but you are curious about the in-depth of some destination, then slow travel is something that we really like, and so you can really discover take a few days, stay in Halong Bay like for 3 nights, discover all the in-depth of Halong Bay, of 2 nights on the boat and 1 night on the island. It would be fabulous as well. So this is where the 2 sides are totally possible in terms of logistic. Laos, Cambodia and Vietnam combined, it would be a fabulous trip where you see so many different things at the same time. But it would take time. You will need time for that. And quickly in mind, it would be around 14 days at least, not less than that, to be able to. If not, it would be really rushy, and 14 days is already very rushy. This is one thing that's to keep in mind. Second, to keep in mind, to be true too, the flight proposal are very limited, so the time that you spend on and the cost of the flights are quite high. So it boosts immediately, in fact, your budget when you do the combined trip. This is where eventually what I can see interesting is that to combine the northern part of Vietnam and Laos, because flying from Hanoi to Luang Prabang is quite simple. That could be a really good one, and then combine the southern part of Vietnam with Cambodia. It gives you a lot of flexibility.
And thanks, Tuan, both of you, for joining in for the webinar today and sharing this piece of interesting information. We will be putting this up on our YouTube as well, so perhaps more people will get to know. The idea is to get to know more local experiences, different experiences, and our travelers should benefit from your knowledge about and your expertise on your own country. So thank you so much, everybody joining in. If you still have questions, you can write to us at shilpi@unhotel.in or manish@unhotel.in, and we would be happy to answer your questions. Thank you, everybody, for joining in.